Since 1945, the world has been under the shadow of nuclear destruction. And with this threat comes the uncertainty of where and when a nuclear weapon will be used.
Check, thanks, 1-2.
There always is the possibility of an accident. There have been 32 accidents. The first one in 1950 and the last one in 1980. Still, we have to have a trained cadre of people who is prepared and practiced to respond to an accident should it ever occur. Accidents have occurred atop of snowy mountains and crashed at the end of runways. One of B-50 was flying, and for reasons that nobody ever will know, it augured straight in and everything blew up. We've had many weapons destroyed by fire. Some of those have been very difficult to gather because they're just melted and slag from the aircraft. A couple of weapons were accidentally dropped from aircraft. There have been mid-air collisions. There have been planes destroyed in terrible weather. Planes just came apart, and bombs went on down. Some weapons that were jettisoned at sea, mostly in deep water. So many years ago that by now, who knows what's down there.
The A-4 Skyhawk was among the most reliable fighter-bomber aircraft for the United States Navy. First put into service in 1956, the aircraft was used up to and throughout the Vietnam War. During a tactical nuclear alert status, an A-4 aircraft loaded with one nuclear weapon rolls off the elevator of a U.S. aircraft carrier. The pilot, aircraft, and weapon are lost. Nuclear weapons armed and ready to be deployed at a moment's notice. Some were stationed in silos, on alert, awaiting the command to launch. Some were carried in strategic bombers, flying secret missions 24 hours a day. Others were located in nuclear-powered submarines, patrolling the ocean depths, each with potential accidents waiting to happen. Since 1950, there have been 32 nuclear weapon accidents, known as broken arrows. A broken arrow is defined as an unexpected event involving nuclear weapons that result in the accidental launching, firing, detonating, theft, or loss of the weapon. To date, 6 nuclear weapons have been lost and never recovered. Now, recently declassified documents reveal the history and secrecy surrounding the events known as broken arrows.
Moffett Air Force Base, headquarters SAC. It's here the finger is kept on the pulse of over 3,000 bombers and 200,000 people spread halfway around the world. Communications from SAC bases everywhere terminate here. Instantly, from one central point, all of the Strategic Air Command is placed on alert, poised, ready to scramble. A global exercise, men and machines, galvanized instantly into a massive force, bent on carrying the free world striking power right to the doorstep of an aggressor if necessary. Day or night, the green light is on as SAC planes move.
The Soviet detonation of an atomic device in 1949 broke the U.S. nuclear monopoly. It would not be long before Soviet nuclear designs would be weaponized into a functional and deliverable bomb. The Strategic Air Command would go on heightened alert and scramble to get nuclear weapons airborne.
This is Swordfish. Prepare to copy a message. Break. Break.
This heightened state of alert would result in 5 broken arrows occurring the very next year. A B-29 carrying nuclear weapons experiences difficulties on takeoff from an Air Force base in Northern California. The aircraft attempts an emergency landing and crashes. Firefighters and emergency personnel rush in to fight the fire and rescue the crew. The high explosives inside the nuclear weapons detonate, killing fire and rescue personnel. 19 people are killed in the explosion. Among the casualties was General Robert F. Travis, for whom the Air Force Base is now named. The detonation of over 10,000 pounds of high explosive blasted a crater 20 yards across and was felt as far away as 30 miles.
The second accident on April 11, 1950 involved a B-29 taking off from Kirtland and whacked into the side of a mountain up there. This was a big weapons storage area, and people were in the mountain actually working on weapons, and they didn't even know what happened. They got a team out, and these were people who were experts in identifying parts of the weapons. And they got up to the top and they worked their way down very carefully, identifying where the high explosives, where the weapon was cracked and shattered. So there were chunks of HE laying about, and that had to be noted. They had to find the bodies of the crew, and they had to find and recover the classified components of the weapon. There's still pieces of aluminum on top of the mountain. Although many of these accidents were similar in many respects, all of them were unique in that they occurred in different parts of the country or the world. And they had, different kinds of weapons.
The Beaumark was a surface-to-air missile designed to intercept long-range enemy bombers. Reaching almost 3 times the speed of sound, the Beaumark delivered a nuclear warhead with a yield approaching 10 kilotons. 9 months after the Beaumark became operational, an accident occurred at McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey. A high-pressure helium tank explodes, rupturing the missile's fuel tank. The warhead was destroyed by fire, and radioactive contamination was restricted to the area directly beneath the weapon. The B-36 Peacemaker was the first and largest intercontinental bomber ever deployed. A B-36 ferrying a nuclear weapon from Biggs Air Force Base in Texas to Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico drops a nuclear weapon through the bomb bay doors during a routine procedure.
The bomb was called the Mark 17. It was actually the largest bomb we ever made. The estimated yield was in the range between 15 and 20 megatons, which makes it over 1,000 times more powerful than anything that was dropped during World War II. It was standard procedure for the technicians to go back into the bomb bay and pull out this cotter pin. The technician who pulled the key out watched the bomb fall through the bottom of the airplane, going through the bomb bay doors, dropping towards the ground below them. Released of the burden of this tremendously heavy device, the airplane shot up in the air about 1,000 feet, startling everybody on board. The bomb hit the ground with an explosion that was visible and audible in Albuquerque. The full explosion of the bomb obviously would have destroyed Albuquerque and most of Santa Fe. We would have heard about it. Instead, it was just the primary trigger, the first stage of explosive. This was a conventional explosive, but it did destroy the bomb and spread fragments of the weapon around about a mile area. The only casualty we know about was a cow, which was killed by a piece of flying debris.
The B-47 Stratojet was the first fully jet-powered strategic bomber deployed by the U.S. Becoming operational in June of 1950, the B-47 also had the greatest number of nuclear accidents of any strategic bomber. A B-47 en route from Hunter Air Force Base in Georgia accidentally jettisons an unarmed nuclear weapon over an area east of Florence, South Carolina. The bomb falls into a garden near the home of Walter Gregg, where the high explosive portion of the weapon detonates upon impact.
My house over in here, where these little pine trees and these other tall trees are, I kept all the bushes cut out. It was a real pretty place. That afternoon, cloudy, kind of cool, windy. My son and myself were in the backyard. My 2 daughters, my niece, and the maid in the little playhouse the girls had built. About 4:15 that afternoon, the airplane came over the house, and just as he passed over our little shelter we were in, we heard an explosion.
An atomic bomb breaks loose from a mounting shackle in a B-47 jet over Florence, South Carolina, causing a sensational freak accident. The home of Walter Gregg was turned into a shambles. In the Gregg yard, the blast tore a 35-foot deep crater.
When the explosion happened, I came out of my garage. All I could see a little curl of smoke coming out of the hole. So I never did go over to look until the next day. It just came out of it just like a bolt of lightning, boom, and it was all over. Concussion for that bomb blew all the plaster on the inside loose. The 2x4 studding in the wall, a lot of those were broken. caved the roof in, messed the floors up, walls up. Had a freezer, it moved it over a few feet on the floor. The hallway was full of dirt and mud. My automobile, the windows were blown out. It was completely stripped. You couldn't hardly run into it with a bulldozer and done very much worse. I was in the hospital when a fella called me from Atlanta. He said an atomic bomb fell up there. Came from a SAC plane, flying approximately 6 to 8 miles high, and accidentally bomb dropped. No frogs or tadpoles or little fish ever developed in that hole. And that's a right good sign there that something has happened. They offered me $500 to fill the hole up. But I'd have to dig another hole just as big to get the dirt to fill that hole up, so I wouldn't take them. I'd rather have it, the hole there, than another hole someplace else.
A lot of the weapons involved combat aircraft like B-47s and B-29s and B-50s and B-52s, carrying weapons, and there was a time when we had an alert system in which we had bombers flying all the time, and in a moment's notice could have gone over and bombed their target.
The B-52 Stratofortress has dropped more nuclear devices during atmospheric testing than any other aircraft. The first on May 20, 1956, at Bikini Atoll. In 1962, during Operation Dominic, the B-52 dropped nearly 30 thermonuclear weapons for the test series. The B-52 was vital in Operation Chrome Dome. Chrome Dome was a code name for the Strategic Air Command's Airborne Alert Program, which began in 1961 as tensions between the U.S. and Soviet Union deepened in the Cold War.
EW, check that authentication.
12 B-52 Stratofortresses would carry nuclear bombs on 4 different routes every minute of the day, 365 days a year. One route would take a B-52 over Greenland, another headed east over Spain, and a third route crossed the Pacific from Alaska to Japan, ready to strike targets in the Soviet Union at a moment's notice.
Pilot, this is EW. Get checks. We've received the gold code. Check your envelopes. Alan, this is Nav over turning point number 12. Change heading to 061. Descent point coming up. Pilot, this is Nav. Pop-up point in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
For the next 5 years, these airborne alert missions would lead to a string of broken arrow events for the B-52. During an airborne alert mission, a B-52 from Seymour Johnson Air Force Base experiences structural failure. 2 nuclear weapons separate from the aircraft during the breakup. The exact yield of the weapon, while still classified, is estimated to be greater than 20 megatons. One bomb's parachute deploys, and the weapon receives little impact damage, landing in a tree. Upon recovery of the intact nuclear weapon, it's discovered that 5 of the 6 safety devices had failed. Only a single switch prevented that bomb from detonating. It is calculated that a bomb of this size, detonated over Detroit, would result in almost 2 million casualties and over 1 million injuries. As a result of the Goldsboro accident, many new safety devices were placed on U.S. nuclear weapons, and the Soviets were encouraged to do the same. Yuba City, California. A B-52 experiences pressurization failure, forcing it to descend to 10,000 feet.
Caution. Caution.
Flying at this lower altitude, the B-52 consumes a greater amount of fuel. Before the plane is able to meet up with a tanker aircraft, it runs out of fuel.
Caution. Caution. Fuel. 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 Fuel.
Yuba City was an unusual accident in the fact that the B-52 ran out of fuel, and they were unable to meet with a tanker. They ran out of fuel, and the pilot told the crew to bail out, and they did. The pilot headed it for a field, and it just augered in, went in gliding, and one wingtip hit, and the thing went like that, and it was just little bitty pieces of airplane. The weapons, there were 2 weapons aboard, and they were literally destroyed. I mean, just torn asunder.
By the early 60s, a structural weakness was discovered in the tail section design of the B-52. Severe turbulence could result in a structural failure of the tail and loss of the aircraft.
Preceding the accident, the aircraft was flown by another crew, and they developed an in-flight mechanical problem with the airplane.
Pilot to crew, report in.
Roger, Captain. There's some problems with the stabilization.
They diverted the airplane into a base in Massachusetts. And so they rounded up my crew and had us go to Massachusetts to return the plane. We planned our route depending on the weather, which was forecast to be quite good. There were some areas of rain and snow, but at the altitudes we were at, we expected to be in the clear.
Rewind radio check.
We encountered this area of moderate turbulence, so we requested a change in altitude to try and get ourselves into smoother conditions. And while we were effecting that change in altitude, the turbulence became severe. I remember having a clear thought, I think I've still got it. And then it became completely uncontrollable and it went over inverted, and there was no recovering from that. Bailout command was ordered and people started egressing the airplane, which results in immediate depressurization and a loss of cabin pressure and pretty much chaos because everything that's not fastened down departs. And all of a sudden you go from there, a warm, comfortable cocoon, almost instantaneously into a really harsh outside element where the wind is full in your face. You're traveling at the speed the airplane was, approximately 500 miles an hour. And you've left a warm, heated environment into sub-freezing temperatures. I mean, your adrenaline is pumping and you are frightened. I hit the ground, came through this small tree. Your first instinct is to get help. And you want to grab somebody and say, "Hi, help me." And there's nobody. The mechanical things of trying to get out of the parachute that made me begin to think, you must survive. Help will be here if you can survive long enough. Next day, I was able to get a portion of the parachute out of the tree, construct a shelter, and I was also able to dig down through the snow to where I could get the sleeping bag on the ground. I felt certain that search aircraft were airborne looking, but I also knew that they would not be able to operate in the mountains below the cloud deck, and so I resigned myself to they will not find me today. My priorities became survival. Major McCormick was the first one found. During his descent, he was able to see the lights from a farmhouse. And daylight the next morning, he was able to make his way to the farmhouse. So he was the first one recovered. And while I was in the hospital, they found 2 of the other 3, and 1 was not found until after I left the hospital. The other 3 were deceased. The last one to be found, Sergeant Wooten, was in a remote wooded area, but near enough to where he could see a house. And he had tried to make his way to the house, but he had physical injuries he suffered during the egress from the airplane and was a victim of exposure. I went back that summer. I returned and there's a monument erected to the citizens of the town who volunteered to search for the crew. And bless their hearts, I take my hat off to them. No offense to the people in Maryland, but I chose this summer to visit.
Perhaps one of the best-known Broken Arrow events was the Palomares accident off the coast of Spain. SAC bombers were refueled in flight somewhere in the world every 6 minutes. To perform this refueling, a fleet of nearly 700 KC-135s would rendezvous with the B-52s. During one of these routine high-altitude refueling operations, tragedy strikes.
They were coming in for the refueling over Palomares, and something happened. They either came in too hot or air turbulence or something like that, and the two airplanes collided.
Both aircraft fall out of the sky near Palomares, Spain. Inside the B-52 were 4 high-yield thermonuclear weapons.
Palomares was our biggest mess that we've had. 2 of the weapons HE exploded. They found 1 intact, damaged. Contamination was found in the village, on the buildings, the roads, the fields.
While not creating a nuclear detonation, the explosion releases radioactive contamination in the area.
They had a lot of people walking through contaminated areas. The end result was we ended up with about 6 people that had detectable plutonium out of 422.
Approximately 1,400 tons of contaminated soil and vegetation were removed to the United States for storage.
But the real problem that they were worried about is they couldn't find the 4th weapon.
The 4th weapon is missing. Extensive recovery efforts were launched off the coast of Palomares to locate the bomb. After searching for nearly 3 months, the lost bomb is located by the Alvin submersible, more than a half-mile under the Mediterranean. Almost 2 years to the date of the Palomares accident, a B-52 from Plattsburgh Air Force Base in New York State crashes some 7 miles southwest of the runway at Thule Air Force Base in Greenland. Thule Air Force Base is located about 950 miles north of the Arctic Circle. The base was a refueling point for long-range bombers directed toward the Soviet Union. The bomber carries 4 thermonuclear weapons, all of which blow apart from the high explosives material, scattering radioactive contamination across the landscape.
The airplane hit very hard. All the conventional high explosive detonated and caused the spread of contamination up there.
Most of the contamination was contained in the area that was blackened from the fuel, particles that adhered to that.
Perpetual twilight with winds up to 85 miles per hour and temperatures as low as 70 degrees below zero hamper cleanup and recovery efforts.
They then started the cleanup.
There's a question of getting earth movers to come in and pick it up and put it in tubs, and they'd bring them back into a place called the tank farm where we had 67 25,000 gallon fuel tanks for winter storage, and then move it out in the summertime when the port opened up.
Cleanup continued for 8 months collecting some 237,000 cubic feet of contaminated snow, ice, and debris. The radioactive debris was then shipped to the Savannah River plant in the U.S. for disposal. Following the Thule accident, the Strategic Air Command ordered all nuclear weapons to be removed from airborne alert missions. Spring 1968. The mystery surrounding the sinking of the USS Scorpion has long been a subject of speculation and intrigue. The Scorpion receives a top-secret message shortly before midnight. Change course and head for the Canary Islands, where a mysterious collection of Soviet ships had caught the Navy's eye, and so began the mystery of the Scorpion.
The Scorpion was coming back from a cruise, and it disappeared. And they didn't know where it was for some time, but using various methods that the Navy had, they were able to kind of get the general location, and they eventually found it. And it contained 2 Mark 34 nuclear weapons, which were in a Mark 45 torpedo.
Recently declassified documents revealed that the Scorpion was carrying 2 Mark 45 anti-submarine or Aster torpedoes with nuclear warheads aboard. These were low-yield, tactical nuclear weapons. May 17, 1968, was the last time anyone saw the Scorpion. The submarine mysteriously sank 5 days later. More than 5 months later, the Scorpion's wreckage was found on the ocean floor 2 miles deep in the Atlantic. All 99 crew members aboard the sub had perished.
They went down and took pictures of it. I've seen some of the photographs, and the pieces you see are very small pieces. To my knowledge, they never did actually find the Mark 45 torpedoes.
The weapons have never been recovered, adding another degree of mystery to an already suspicious accident. The Titan II was the largest ICBM or intercontinental ballistic missile deployed by the United States. Armed with a multi-megaton warhead, the Titan II carried the single largest nuclear warhead in use by the Strategic Missile Program. Hidden in underground silos, these missiles were on alert 24 hours a day, awaiting the command to launch against Soviet targets. The Titan II was the ultimate liquid-fueled missile, yet required significant maintenance. During a routine maintenance, an Air Force repairman drops a heavy socket wrench.
It started for the Air Force early on the evening of the 18th of September of 1980. And they dropped a wrench, a socket, if you will, off a socket wrench. The socket weighed about 6 pounds. And it fell past the safety net and hit the wall and bounced back in and hit the skin of the Titan, which is quite thin. And it punctured it, and so it started releasing fuel.
The missile complex and the surrounding area are evacuated as a team of specialists are called in.
They'd worked on it for about 8 hours, and they finally decided to make some checks, and 2 men had gone back in. There the story gets a little fuzzy because, first of all, there was the explosion as the men were coming back out. One man was killed, blown completely out of his safety suit, and the other man was badly injured. We got word that there had been an accident. I was at home, I got the call. Loaded us on 2 helicopters, and we flew to the site, which is north and a little bit to the east of Little Rock. We got to the site, and I was sitting on the outside edge, and it was kind of interesting because you're looking down as we circled, and we made about 3 passes around the hole in the ground. And it's I don't know how you explain this feeling in the pit of your stomach when you look down and you see that much destruction of an area, what had been pristine a few hours before.
The explosion kills 1 member of the team and injures 21 others. The force of the explosion blows off the 740-ton silo door and catapults the missile's nuclear warhead 600 feet out of the silo. To resolve these types of nuclear emergencies, the Department of Defense and the Atomic Energy Commission, now the Department of Energy, in June of 1970, jointly created the ARG, or Accident Response Group. ARG is a team of specialists trained to assess an accident site and determine the best course of action. The ARG possesses an impressive array of high-tech equipment, but its greatest asset is the technical expertise of its members, some having over 50 years of extensive experience in the design, fabrication, assembly, and testing of nuclear weapons.
The Accident Response Group is an organization of people from the Department of Energy and the 3 national laboratories, Los Alamos, Livermore, and Sandia, who are experts in accidents. We also have part of the team from Pantex, where the weapons are assembled and disassembled, and we have further access to anybody in the entire Department of Energy system that we need who has specific expertise in a given area.
Here, 65 miles northwest of Las Vegas, secret nuclear weapon accident maneuvers have taken place.
Breaking news coming into the newsroom now. Apparently there has been an accident involving a U.S. Army helicopter carrying nuclear weapons. The FAA confirms a private plane has collided with a U.S. Army helicopter. This 2 aircraft have crashed in the rural town of Waimoni, California. The explosion, smoke, and fire attracting the townspeople and fire department. We do not know if there's been a release of radiation or if the weapons have been compromised. Stay tuned to this station. We'll have details as they break.
Disperse activities. Everybody move back.
Since 1945, the United States has conducted over 1,000 nuclear tests. While accidents involving nuclear tests are rare, they are not unprecedented. June 4, 1962. A nuclear device atop a Thor missile falls into the Pacific Ocean near Johnston Island after the rocket malfunctions and is destroyed minutes after liftoff. Another nuclear device is destroyed on the launch pad when the Thor missile fails to launch. While a broken arrow might involve the unintentional detonation of nuclear weapon components, the opposite might be true for other nuclear incidents.
Misfire! Misfire! Hold your positions. Repeat, there has been a misfire. Hold your positions.
Diablo was, as far as I was concerned, was to be no different from any of the others. And it was really with a kind of a sense of outrage, that sort of a feeling like, well, this shouldn't have happened. This can't have happened. There was quite a bit of discussion about, who was going to climb the tower and who was responsible, but there was really never any question. It's clearly going to be the people who had last been there. There was a small crew of 3 of us who had been what was called the arming party. We had made the final connections and turned the thing on so it was ready to fire. And I think all of us felt that we didn't want anybody else going in there and turning it off. We wanted to do it ourselves. As we drove up to the tower in the morning, the 5 of us driving out there, there was the sense that this tower's not supposed to be here. You are approaching an explosive to which a firing signal has been sent and it didn't go off. So you don't absolutely know that it's okay. So the 3 of us just simply went up one after another. I don't think there was really any conversation. We're all kind of quiet. We're all anxious to get it over with. We're all anxious to get up there and be done with it. It was still early morning, and so as we would climb, we could see our shadows going up the tower on the desert floor. I went in first, and everything looked perfectly okay. Seemed to appear to be fine. So the others came on up too. And each one of us had a particular job to do. I mean, that's why there were 3 of us. Each of us had performed a particular function, and we had to undo it. And so that's what we did. We didn't want to climb back down the tower. So we had to wait for the construction people to come back in and bring the elevator back so they could come up and get us. I made a remark, I think, that at various times when we were getting ready to do some of these shots and I would be up there, I would make paper airplanes and sail them off the top of the tower. And this time I didn't even have any scraps of paper to do that with.
Six, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 time.
Since the introduction of the atomic bomb, the U.S. nuclear stockpile grew to over tens of thousands of weapons. Today, under international treaties, the stockpile is less than 10,000. Modern safeguards and safety procedures further reduce the potential for disaster. However, with thousands of nuclear weapons still in existence, accidents can happen.